So something I really have difficulty with, and the common theory, Western music, and all that, is that its fundamental approach, where it comes from, is that it takes this very specific group. You know, at the beginning it was even smaller than it is now. Now we're up to 12, but it was 7. And rejects everything else. Nothing else is allowed in this community of sound that's made as music. And it proceeds along from there. And it wants those choices to be precise, and if something's outside of that, it's undesirable and unwelcome. And as and obviously where this goes as a social concept is, you know, we've seen plenty of that, you know, and you know, the nature of bigotry can be expressed in music just by the choices of what one is playing, if that's where it comes from. Now, just for purposes of comparison, Pakistani or Indian music, everything is bending and, you know, adapting itself to the sound that they're making. It's playing toward harmony instead of out from this concept, theoretical concept of harmony. It seeks and it looks for ways to bring its various sound together and create coherence among them. And to me, that's just very obviously a much better conceptual place to start. As how much can we welcome into this? You know, how can we receive the sounds that are being made and make them become music, instead of saying, okay, we have this little tiny set, and that's all you get, and everything has to be made out of those. It's, I think that's, it's really detrimental to imagination. It's really detrimental to exploration. It's sort of, by using that system, we teach people that music is this gated community, and they're only allowed in if they, you know whatever the password is, or you know, the same way in gated communities, if you have enough money, or you have the code that you punch in at the gate. And I don't think music or society should be like that. I think we should find, you know, the cool thing about the world getting smaller through all this communication, and there being so many of us now, is that this is an opportunity for us to put more things than are dreamt of in our philosophy to work. We're exposed to ideas that we didn't grow up with, and we're exposed to all kinds of things our parents never heard of. And I think that's awesome. I'm glad to be alive now because of that. And if we're going to have music going forward that that goes anywhere or does anything, we're not going to have it by like building our little fort in the middle of you know, Indian territory, and sitting up on the things with guns shooting everybody that comes by. And that to me is what the Western system kind of does, you know. And I don't think it's terrible. A lot of beautiful music has been made in it. You know, depending on what you like. this system produced Debussy, and it produced Stravinsky and Bartók and stuff like that. And you know, if you like older stuff, it brought you Beethoven and Bach. You know, I would like to point out that I think that the ones I like, you know, Debussy and Stravinsky and Bartók, I think they produce great music more in spite of the system than because of it. Those were the tools they had to use, and they used them brilliantly. For Beethoven and Bach, like, they were just really happy in that was their world, and that was, you know, they did really nicely in there. I still think that anything built on a basis of exclusion is eventually going to lose my interest, just because I don't think that way in my life, and I don't like people who think that way in my life. I don't like that as the basis of our society. I don't really think that progression through rejection, this ultimate narrowing down all the time, I don't think that's a really great idea. The idea that there's one single seed and everything has to grow from it, I don't like that idea either. I think there's many seeds, and all kinds of things move into all kinds of things, and to try to make it go to a singularity, I think that's unimaginative, and I think it's deeply uncreative. And part of what I'm getting at is that you can grow up and play music, as I did, and in this system, and that's kind of imprinted on you from the word go. Like, you don't really know when you start out that you're participating in a system based on rejection. You know, this is what you can do, okay, you know, you can play like this if you use these chords, okay, you know, cool. You know, and as you learn more and more, it gives you this vocabulary to use. But you've kind of already been brainwashed, no matter what you really want out of it. And I don't think people necessarily want that out of it. I don't think people necessarily want to, you know, someone who's attracted to music and inspired to do it. I don't think very many of them deeply crave rejecting lots of things. Artists and musicians are kind of people that are interested and curious. But when your avenue to pursuing your curiosity is in this narrow hallway, you know, and the Western musical system is very narrow. It's very specific to what it does. It's very specific to what its end product is supposed to be like. It's good for what it was, you know, 300 years ago or whatever, they thought it up, and well, 250, but, you know, it was a really good advance at the time. But there's no reason to be stuck with it anymore. There just isn't. And to stick people with it at impressionable ages and kind of beat it into them that this is the way music works, it isn't at all the way music works. There's all kinds of music that doesn't work the way Western music does. You know, Western music works, but Indian music works too, and Chinese music, and, you know, Indonesian music, and Middle Eastern music. You know, everybody has their thing that they thought up and their system of doing things. Everybody. I do too, you know, even though mine is, I don't really define mine. I try to, you know, but I still have one because, you know, you can only think up as much as you can think up. And so you're stuck with the limits of your own imagination at one point or another. And we're all going to be stuck with the limits of our imagination at one point or another anyway, but why get stuck with the limits of somebody in 1775's imagination, or 1823, or 1899, or 1999? Like, why get stuck with that? Like, there's a large and very workable sound world. Let's explore that. Let's not go with this, well, only white people are allowed in this, only white notes are allowed in this country club, and, only these 12 people can come. There's a million pitches and a million sounds, Why get stuck with just those? I guess that's all I'm really saying is that, the Western system's very good, and people have worked really hard on it and put a lot of brain power into it, and even quite a bit of imagination, but it's still just what it is. It's still this little closed box of things you can use, and if that was all you had, I can't really come up with a good if for this. If I was on a desert island stuck with only a piano, I would still be like trying to make a ocarina out of a coconut or something, It's, it's just kind of like, why buy into that boredom, And it is boring. You can tell that, the imaginative and creative composers, coming from the 19th into the 20th century, really were rebelling against it and trying to find other things. They had to encompass Bartok. People had to learn other techniques and, write notes that aren't there in there. Same later with, when you get into the post-war people, you even have like, Cage, who just wants to give up and says like, let's just randomly throw shit together, like, because there's nothing more that we can do by like assembling these same elements. And so like, music should be music. It shouldn't just be, it shouldn't have that definition as Western music. And sadly, a lot of the music around the world has been kind of co-opted into sounding like Western music because those are the instruments that get mass produced. And they're everywhere, they're cheap, guitars, keyboards, what have you, and they're all in this equal temperament system. And so that all this collective imagination that's existed all over the world in years is getting filtered into this narrow hallway. At the same time, there are a lot of people like trying to push out the walls of that narrow hallway too, and glad for them, But maybe we just don't need this hallway, and maybe we should just like open the door and get out of it, and start from there, and really think about music as bringing sounds into a generality instead of saying, okay, you can have this one, that one, this one, that one, this one, that one, and you can't have any of these. These are, banished. I don't think we benefit ourselves socially by embracing that concept, and if we put it in, it'll always be there unless we don't accept it. So that if we accept this and we play, same stuff all the time. We're not going to make our world more open and accepting that way. If we aspire to have a world that's more inclusive and more curious and more creative and more expansive, we're going to have a tough time doing that if the soundtrack of it is built on this essentially rejectionist system. You know?
Stop.